passed, and we have Dr. Shaps with us, who's our superintendent with the large task of drawing up our budget, which we'll be voting on in just a couple of weeks on May 15th. And we're lucky this morning to have George Latimer with us over here, Judy Myers, Steve Otis. And when Dr. Shaps finishes his presentation, we're going to have the people that are running for the school board this year introduce themselves, and we'll be reading a statement from one of them who couldn't be with us this morning. So,
thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I want to make sure everybody can hear me. I know I'm contending with interesting music, but I'll try my best. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge, as superintendent, my work is to coexist or to co-lead with our Board of Education. It's my pleasure to just recognize our board president, Robin Jaczynski, who's here this morning, our vice president, Nancy Pearson, and our trustee, Lynette C., who's here as well. It's been certainly a productive, I think, year for us. And this is a great opportunity just to highlight where we're going with our budget and our plans for investing in our physical plant, our infrastructure. But I thought, since I've been having a lot of conversations with parents and citizens about the budget, I thought it would be appropriate to start off talking about an experience from last night that I think really lends itself to our thinking about why our budget and passing the budget and supporting our school system is critically important. So last night I had the opportunity to participate in a viewing of a documentary film that summarized in a very poignant way the experiences of 64 seniors from our AP US Government class who traveled to New Hampshire to participate directly in the New Hampshire primary. And needless to say, when we talk about relevant learning, and we talk about this idea of extending what happens in the classroom and allowing students to apply their skills, knowledge, and understanding, it was an incredible opportunity to see last night how students really were thinking about what the political process was entailed and then go right into it, from making signs and walking down Main Street in Manchester to picking up a headset and asking citizens of New Hampshire to vote for Newt Gingrich, to really meeting all of the national correspondents, Dan Rather, Candy Crawley, Chuck Todd, and participating in an evening event from Politico where they were asking incredible, what I would say, sophisticated questions about the political process, and then hearing the reflections after the fact about what they learned about our American political system. And to me, it speaks to what I think is our overarching goal as a school system and what we hope to accomplish each day. That is to prepare our students for the broader world. That is to really create experiences from kindergarten through grade 12 that are not only relevant today, but really speak to the heart of our democracy. It speaks to the heart of roles and responsibility of American citizens. And so for me, it was an incredibly proud moment last night to see the parents and the students just watch what really unfolded to be a 3-day experience at the primary. And it was an incredible opportunity. And it was interesting to hear Newt Gingrich talk about how a group of students from New York State had the gumption to travel to New Hampshire, whereas all the students in New Hampshire really, with this world around them, really weren't actively participating. So I think the candidates themselves were so impressed by our students who were able to walk into a situation and immediately kind of turn it on and react to the situation. So this is kind of a segue, I think, in terms of talking about what we hope to accomplish. I have for you a summary of a PowerPoint that I have been sharing with the community. And I think I'd like to just walk through the PowerPoint and kind of talk about two things. One, our rationale for proposing a budget for the 2012-2013 school year, and also to highlight our capital bond project that is also a proposition on May 15th for consideration for voters, and talk about the importance of both our budget and the bond, if I can, and certainly answer any questions that you may have so that you can be fully informed about the process. For any budget process, the starting point for me is to kind of articulate and reinforce your guiding principles. And if you can see on our first slide, our guiding principles remain providing what I would say is a relevant learning experience, promoting academic excellence and rigor, and also ensuring in some ways a broad curricular experiences, from the experience of our students in New Hampshire to our strings program, to our arts, to our PACE theater program, to our commitment to Mandarin. That all these experiences for us really demonstrate a commitment to our students and to our families. The second highlight, at least in our mind, in terms of guiding principle, is high-quality professional development. The strength and the enduring nature of a strong school district is defined by the teachers that are recruited and by the professional development they receive over time. And so this budget reflects our interest to invest in the adults who work in our system and to provide them what I think is with relevant professional development that they can support in terms of using within their classrooms to strengthen instruction. One other guiding principle that I think is critically important that I hope all of you can appreciate is that the emphasis on finding efficiencies. Our mantra has been in the last 2 years is to kind of turn over every rock, big or small, to find every effort in which we can find savings by working more efficient in everything we do. And I'll speak to some of the efficiencies in a few moments. Equally important or tied to this principle is this idea of sound fiscal management. Through our participations with citizens, volunteering as part of the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee, through our Board Finance Committee, we have tried to work and look forward over the next several years to think about how we can be stewards of the public trust when we speak to sound financial management and investing carefully in all aspects of our operations. And so the citizens can see that we have a plan, number one, but two, that we promote transparency in our financial stewardship. And so that's critically important. And then finally, the one guiding principle that to me is the most important is how do we think about the years ahead? How do we imagine what public education should look like? And how do we plan for the future? And so, you know, in many ways, this is an exciting time to be a superintendent, but it's also a challenging moment. But on the excitement side of things, it's really to say, how can we reinvent education? How can we think differently about this institution that has been around for over 100 years? And how do we start to, in some ways, build a new foundation that, in some ways, will provide our students the opportunity to be prepared for jobs that we can't even imagine. When I had the opportunity to meet with superintendents from around the world this summer in Boston at a Future of Learning conference, the biggest challenge was to try to imagine what schools will look like and what jobs will mean 15, 25 years. And so our kindergartens who are entering school now, we're trying to in some way stay ahead of the curve over the next 13 years and reinvent education so it remains in terms of an important resource for our community. So if you turn through, at the same time that we are excited and think about the opportunities through this budget, we recognize the challenges that we're facing. First and foremost, obviously, is the challenge of not only the local and state economy, but the world economy, and the challenge of trying to, in some ways, remain fiscally sound, address our expenses, and maintain our programs at a time of great fiscal challenge. The second is to how do we move forward in this new brave world of the tax cap. We've had many conversations about the changes that came from Albany in terms of the tax cap law. And, you know, from my perspective, the challenge that will lie ahead over the next several years as we deal with a formula that asks for an artificial ceiling in terms of trying to deal with the symptoms and not really the problems of escalating costs. And so this year, I think we've done a remarkable job in building a budget that takes into account the challenge of this artificial cap. But we know that it's going to take, I guess, a concerted effort on all parts to be able to navigate through this challenging landscape over the next several years. The third challenge that I'd like to talk about is our educational needs versus our ability to pay for those needs and support them. So we know that the people who move to Mamaroneck and Larchmont really believe in the strength of a public school system. And we know that part of the formula for success is offering a range of programs and opportunities. And so as we feel the pressure of new initiatives and maintaining the programs, we know that the costs associated with that are challenged by this limiting ability to grow and to maintain the quality of our program. And so how do we recognize the balance between what we want and what we can afford? And finally, I think what is an incredible challenge for us is this idea of meeting ongoing contractual obligations, that is, working with our unions and our personnel to kind of understand the cost associated with running and maintaining a school district, where 85 to 90% of your costs are tied to people. And also what I would say is the underfunded and unfunded mandates that continue to come from Albany. It's interesting, in Massachusetts, when they introduced Proposition 2.5 in the early 80s, built into the language of the law was a promise of no new mandates or unfunded mandates. Yet, since we've received this new tax law, since July, there have been 9 unfunded mandates that I could speak of, some of them critically important, like concussion management policies. But the problem is nobody in Albany has really thought about it. I shouldn't say no one in Albany, because I think we have a wonderful representative here who has thought about that. But seriously, you know, we've asked simply as a regional of superintendents to say, would it make sense and be good planning to, as you introduce mandates that are important for the state, that you consider the impact on the local municipality and school district. That is, cost us out in a way that makes sense. Because the initiatives that have come through around teacher evaluation, or around testing, around concussion management have provided zero funding at the local level to meet these mandates. And so this is continuing to be a problem for us. And as superintendents, we live in a world where we like to find efficiencies and reduce costs, and we've proposed a range of what I would say relief for mandates, and we're hopeful that certainly Albany will listen, because it will help us navigate through this, what I would say, turbulent times. So that's a really reference to the challenges we face. I wanted to highlight some of the levels of efficiencies that the district has kind of put forth this year with the help of the Board of Education. As part of this budget this year, we are shifting to fully outsourcing transportation. We predict that we will save taxpayers close to $820,000, which will, again, allow us to maintain a decrease in our budget that I'm going to speak about the numbers in a few minutes. At the same time, we've been able to find efficiencies in how we use technology for copying and reduce our relying on paper. So we were able to reduce the clerical staff. We're investing in technology, upgrading our network systems, and so we were able to reduce staffing around IT technicians. We were able to negotiate successfully for the first half of this year aggressive health care insurance rates with our employees, which will provide for considerable savings, and a slew of other efficiencies that I think represent both big and small ways in which we are trying to find ways to save money. And that has really translated in many respects to a conservative budget for this year. But it's important to note that we will continue to emphasize this notion of efficiency and sound management that's important. Another example is we're looking at how we're using time across our district. We're working with a scheduling consultant to maximize our elementary, middle, and high school schedules to ensure that we can deploy our staff in the best possible way. And as a result of that, we were able to actually save one position in PE this year by maximizing how our PE teachers are scheduled and shared across the district. And that will continue to grow and evolve over the next couple of years. Obviously, some of the things we have to think about and continue is to work with our unions about negotiating favorable contracts that recognize the changing times and our ability to sustain and grow as a district. And so when we talk about this large notion of efficiencies, the board is working, and you know, for example, we're currently in mediation with our Teachers Association to try and find a true partnership and a resolution that will position the district in the next several years that will still allow us to, one, recruit highly qualified teachers, to remain relevant, so to speak, in Westchester, but also to be able to reduce costs and slow down the growth of our budget over time. One of the things that I'm excited about, but at the same time I caution, is the fact that our district is actually growing. We are one of the few school systems in Westchester that is seeing actually a growth in enrollment. We anticipate a 2% growth over the year, K through 12. What that has done, though, in many cases, is put added pressure to our elementary schools. Both Murray and the Merrick Avenue schools are running out of space. This year, part of this budget, we are moving our pre-K program from Merrick Avenue School to Central to be able to continue the program. But as we look at this growth in enrollment, we certainly are going to have to consider choices in the next several years as we run out of space. But the positive side of it was we believe that people in the general area, and I know that in talking with a number of new parents over the last several weeks, is that they have highlighted in terms of their search for a place to live, Mamaroneck and Larchmont as a place they want to be based on the quality of the school system. So as a superintendent, that's music to my ears. You can't imagine anything better than to hear a preschool parent saying, we decided to move to this community because we want our children to access the public schools. So as much as we're challenged by the increase in enrollment, certainly we are pleased that people are interested in coming to our school system in our community. In terms of the numbers, it's quite clear. Our budget that we have proposed to the community is $124,295,897. That represents a budget-to-budget decrease of $1,030,000, or a 0.82% budget-to-budget decrease. It also translates into a tax levy increase of 1.08%. The reason that figure is important is because it is significantly below the 2.53% allowable tax levy growth that we have been, through our formula, identified to allow us to grow in our budget. So if you think of it, if you haven't been paying close attention to the tax cap formula in the law, despite our efforts to publicize and communicate, we as a district, through this formula, were able to grow our tax levy by 2.53%. But we are only growing our tax levy by 1.08%. And to me, again, it reinforces our commitment to our citizens to find ways to maintain the quality, yet reduce fiscal pressure on people. I'm going to touch briefly on staff reductions. I mentioned earlier that we are shifting to a fully outsourced model of transportation. We are reducing, I think, 52.3 or 53.2 positions. 37 of those positions are made up of drivers and monitors and bus personnel. It's important to note that the board is sensitive to the fact that people are losing their positions, and we've been working closely with Ardsley Bus Service to transition our employees to employees of Ardsley. We've met on several occasions, and I think we feel at least positive that a number of our employees will transition and continue to work and drive for Ardsley and be a part of our community. We have been able to reduce other positions through enrollment changes and shifting of programs. Certainly, we're adding 4.2 positions that are tied to shifting programs and buildings. We are providing our middle school students with additional academic intervention services support. So we have kept the additional positions down, and we are looking for, again, efficiencies through personnel by reducing clerical staff and teaching assistants in some ways that are tied to our ability to manage the school system with less people over time. I wanted to say, if you have any particular questions, please don't hesitate to ask while I raise a point, but I'll try to get through and give you time at the end because I do know that we have a lot to talk about. In terms of the overall impact of programs, as I said at the beginning, our goal was to maintain the current experience K through 12, and I feel comfortable we've been able to accomplish that goal. We are continuing with our super team structure at the middle school. I don't think this is a big point other than the fact that, again, we always think on a day-to-day basis of how we want to organize and deploy staff. We're going to continue to maintain the class size guidelines that the board has enacted over the last several years. I mentioned the shift of our program, our pre-K program, to Central Elementary, and the shift in transportation services. As far as the estimated tax implications, because we know that's critically important to taxpayers, this again is a budget-to-budget decrease of 0.82%, a tax levy increase of 1.08%. Before I talk about the tax rate, I wanted to point out that it's important for citizens to know that if we didn't do anything with this budget, that we presented the same budget that we have this year, next year, that the tax rate would go up. And the driving point of that is that our total assessment continues to decrease. And so whether it was the status quo budget or a decreased budget, the overall impact, the immediate impact is taxes would go up. So from the board and the administration's perspective, it was, how do we minimize the increase in taxes based on a $2 million estimated drop in our total assessed valuation? And so we started the process by looking at program reductions and discussing the quality of our programs and our experience. And we were able to move from a 3.43% tax rate increase down to a 2.43% for this year's budget. And I think it's safe to say, as much as we would like to have a zero increase, that it was almost impossible with eroding our program in significant ways to keep from having some form of tax rate increase. This rate of 2.43%, though it's important to note, is primarily driven by the reductions in the total assessed value. Since 2006, we've lost close to $8 million in our total assessment. And again, that relationship is that there's less of a pie to tax. That means that more of our citizens have to contribute to the tax rate. In terms of the estimated cost to taxpayers, based on an average assessed home of $20,000, we estimated the tax rate per thousand would be $782.93. It translates to an increase on a yearly basis of $371.74. I have the visual here to show you you can see the decrease over time in the assessed valuation. But in summary, I think it's important to note several things. This budget actually represents over $2 million of reductions in expenditures to get to a budget that is reducing overall by $1 million. That is, the growth of health insurance, pension costs, of salaries, and other expenditures actually had an increase in our budget, but through sound management and hard decisions, we were able to reduce this budget below the current budget. At the same time, this budget, as I said, is a reduction over $1 million. The assessed value of reduction of $2 million has caused us to present a budget with a tax rate of 2.43%. The highlight overall is that we have a tax levy increase that is well below the tax levy limit, and we'll be able to apply some of that next year as we consider our budget. But for me as superintendent, the success in some ways of this effort, this collective effort, is that we are maintaining the quality of our school system and we're positioning ourselves for the future. And that, to me, is certainly, during these conditions and troubling times, is quite an accomplishment that has been worked out through teachers and administrators and the board overall. I'm going to transition unless there are any questions about the budget. Yes, Keith.
Good morning, Dr. Schaff. In regard to the staff reduction and the question regarding transportation, it's a twofold question. With the contract with the Ardsley bus company, was that a, what do you call it, estimated or a negotiated budget with Ardsley, or did you do with other companies?
Sure. Well, we have a standing contract with Ardsley, and within that contract, we're able to, in some ways, change the amount of outsourcing busing that we would like to be forth on a year-to-year basis. Overall, there are a couple points to understand. Despite having a contract with Ardsley, the state demands a limit to growth in terms of year-to-year expenditures for transportation. And it's really, the rate is, the ceiling of that is CPI or less. And so in looking at our opportunity either to go out for an RFP, to look and see if there are other companies to provide transportation, or understanding, are we happy with Ardsley, and would they provide a rate that would be below that threshold of increase? It was our work with them to understand that actually it was to our benefit to maintain this year-to-year relationship with Ardsley. Yes. That is, the risk involved in this would be to go out and do an RFP for transportation and find that actually a new contract would be more expensive than to continue with Ardsley's costs through their transportation services. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Yes, you are answering.
But it was cost effective for us to keep our relationship with Ardsley based on the fact that we have safety provisions in place. We know and will continue to work with them, that we are continuing to employ a dispatcher who will have direct conversation with them, and that many of our bus drivers, in terms of our conversation with Ardsley, would have the opportunity to work for Ardsley Bus.
That was my other question, because in regard to that, we just talk about 37 staff cuts or 37 personnel cuts. I don't know what the number, the percentage is, but there are a large percentage of people who are the drivers that live in the Mamaroneck-Larchmont community. And as a result of them losing their jobs, thinking that they were connected to the school or to our community, they are now being outsourced. And I heard you say that they have an opportunity to come aboard with the Ardsley Bus Company, but there are no guarantees. But those are the same people who actually live within the 5-mile radius of the school district. They have children and they're invested in our community and they've lost their jobs?
I think we're very sensitive to that fact. I mean, number one, all of our bus drivers are part-time workers. In some cases, we have bus drivers who are retired, who are working on a part-time basis to continue to be employed. I think our conversation with Ardsley from the beginning, and or any company, was to find a way that we could help our employees transition to Ardsley. Ardsley was thrilled to have the opportunity to hire as many. They basically, this week, they had a meeting with bus drivers and said, we would like to hire all of you who are interested. And so our job is to help in that transition and to be mindful that many of our bus drivers live in the community and are part of it, and we hope to help them continue in that experience. I think the difficulty here, and I alluded to, is that we're faced, unfortunately, with making choices. And we are a school system that our primary mission is to educate children. And so we are, unfortunately, having to make all kinds of decisions, including changing services, looking at programs, but we still need to think about maintaining the quality experience of the classroom experience, and that will continue over the next several years. We just can't avoid it, plain and simple.
If I understood you correctly, you said with respect to the pensions that through sound management you're able to handle that. Can you explain what that means?
Well, actually, the pensions are out of our control. That's the one area of cost that they're out of control. I think my concern around the tax cap as a superintendent is that we're dealing with what I said, the symptoms and not the levers. The pension costs, the escalation of pension costs, healthcare costs, salaries, and other obligations have far exceeded on an annual basis the percentage of growth of what the cap will allow. We can certainly, as I stated, negotiate aggressive changes to healthcare and reduce the cost of healthcare. We can't negotiate any changes to pension, and that has to be done in a broad way, obviously, at the state level. And so this is our conundrum. I mean, we can try to take care of things that we can control, but a lot of these things are out of our control, and that's our frustration in many respects, because we know that unless something is done about pension, we're going to be faced with the same circumstance next year and the following year overall. And that's where we're asking for, superintendents love to think about creative ideas and innovation and change. We just would love to have a seat at the table to think about that. Unfortunately, we haven't been called at this point. So let me just make one more point about the contingency budget before I move on to our highlight our capital plan. As part of the tax cap bill, the contingency budget, or the guidelines around contingency, has changed. If the community were to vote down the budget on May 15th in a second budget, we would be forced to move to a contingency budget that would allow us to, or mandate that we live within the current tax levy limit of this year's budget. That translates to an effort to have a forced reduction over $1.2 million of next year's budget. So inevitably, we would have to cut $1.2 million out of the budget that we put forward in order to meet that current tax levy limit of $109 million. Unfortunately, because of the rules of contingency, we would have to work within a formula that would force us to reduce in each of the three areas of the budget. So we would have to reduce administrative costs, we'd have to reduce program or instructional costs around teachers, and we'd have to reduce what I would say operations costs as well. So we wouldn't be able to just pick and choose and say, well, let's further reduce this area of the budget that doesn't impact our classrooms. That this would have a direct impact on our budget, and it would be a challenge. And I tried to show in this slide that $1.2 million is approximately equal to reducing 11 teaching positions in our district. So certainly, it would have a huge significance in terms of the quality of our educational experience. And we've tried hard to kind of convey that message to our citizens overall. The second point, though, in a contingency budget is taxes would still increase. That the idea that if we vote down the budget and, in some ways, force us into contingency, that the taxpayer wouldn't see the impact. As I started to say at the beginning, because of the change in the total valuation, the tax rate would still increase. And so we would rather be in control of our effort to maintain the quality of our schools and limit growth and impact on taxpayers than have to respond and react to that. Transitioning to the capital plan. This year, the district was mandated to identify through the 5-year building condition survey the capital needs of all of our buildings across the district. Our committee, the building committee, which is representative of both school officials, and citizens identified $45 million worth of capital improvements. We then went back and said, you need to identify and prioritize the $45 million, and they successfully identified $25 million of capital needs. We then went back and said, that's not good enough, and we asked them to create a list of top priorities and 1A priorities that were able to reduce the total cost or priority list down to $9.5 million or $9.4 million. The projects listed in this proposition for May 15th represent serious health, safety, and structural needs across our district. And we know that our buildings are not only used by our school system and our children and our staff during the day, but they are central to our community on weekends and in the evenings. And so we feel that in looking at, again, the challenges we face, that we and the board decided it was critically important to invest in improving our facilities, to replace end-of-life plumbing, to replace electrical systems and panels that are antiquated and not working, and to address structural improvements like replacing the steps in front of the Murray Elementary School that the granite has already worn out and is unsafe. And so we have identified in all our buildings $9.4 million of improvements that will, in fact, replace end-of-life plumbing, and in some cases was installed in the 1920s, and to ensure the safety and safe efforts of day-to-day operations of our school. And I don't want to take too much time to walk you through, but you can see it across the district in our school buildings, the types of projects that we have identified. And also, I just want to point out, and this is why it's important, that at the same time that we're asking for investment in the schools, we have, through efficiencies, tried to, in some ways, reduce the impact of that investment. This year, the district refinanced prior debt or pre-existing debt from 2004, 2006, and we estimate that we will save $800,000 over the life of that repayment. We also, through the last bond project, the $22 million bond project, were able to complete the project and save taxpayers $1 million through aggressive bidding and project oversight. In both those instances, the $800,000 and the $1 million, we will use those savings to reduce, in some ways, the impact of this project on the taxpayers by leveling out the debt service fund to ensure that we minimize the tax rate increase of $7.45 on this project. So again, this is an example of how can we think about sound fiscal management and oversight of our buildings and ensure that even when we invest in our buildings at a time that you have historically low interest rates in the range of 1.5% that we'll never see again, that we're able to minimize the impact of $7.45. And to me, that's a critical point in this project. Because the truth of the matter is that if we don't fix these buildings and address these projects, they will still exist, the cost will grow over time, and in many respects we will be spending more money on short-term repairs and kind of holding things together than to be able to say that we've actually addressed issues of serious issues of our buildings that now are positioned for the next 50 years to 100 years to be working the way we want them to work. So overall, the message is we've been able to find efficiencies that reduce the cost. We've identified
situation, bring in a budget at the level that you're bringing, which is a major accomplishment. I just want to go back to the move of the pre-K away from the Merrimack Avenue School. And one of your predecessors had said that one of the greatest things about the pre-K program was what it does for raising up our immigrant population and, the disadvantaged, the new people to the community. And my concern is that moving it away from their geographic center might make it more difficult for the Latino population to access the pre-K, and what is being done to address
in my mind, it's an important point, and we've had a series of meetings with Latino parents, but also our pre-K is open to all parents.
Oh, I know.
Okay. But so what we are pleased is that through our Title I grant and the Universal K grant, we're actually going to be able to provide a bus to and from the Merrimack Avenue School area to ensure that students have access, and are not in a position where they're walking long distance to the school. So, I mean, we certainly listened and understood the concerns about access to Central and this change. And so next year, we will have a central pickup point and drop-off point for our students to ensure that they are not worried about that issue as it relates to how do I access this program. And I think it's important because, unfortunately, we would love to continue to have the pre-K program and MAS. We'll run out of space. And so we were faced with, do we cancel the program, or how can we support the program by finding a new area, but ensure that those parents and students who are part of the program are not inconvenienced in a way that they can't participate. So it's very important. Yes?
Along with that, whatever happened to the program that started with the little babies that was sort of pre-K?
Small treasures. Well, we've been able to continue that program, and I think our challenge is that program cannot be funded through the budget. So it is actually outside the budget. And so where we had a series of donations and grants to get the programs off the ground, and we are in year 8 of that program, I think our effort is to say, one, are we finding that the results of that program is really attributed to, in some ways, advancements in learning? And I had the pleasure of meeting with one of the major donors of the program earlier this week to show, in some cases, that current first, second, and third graders who participated in the program have actually made advancements in their progress. The challenge now becomes, how do we keep this program going over time? Because certainly when the program began and during good economic times, there was a number of benefactors who said this is important. Our challenge now is to really develop an endowment, to think differently. So on a year-to-year basis, we're not thinking about what to do. I'm pleased to say that as a result of showing the results and the data on that, the benefactor has agreed to continue a certain level of funding for the next 4 years. And so our challenge is to work with other resources to find ways to keep this going, because we do believe it's critically important.
And is there room for that program at MAS?
That program will continue at MAS, yes.
What is your and the board's general attitude towards teachers' assessments? And
I was going to say, I can give you my quick reaction, but a thorough explanation may take 2 hours. I think overall, certainly I'm disappointed with the approach that we're taking around accountability and evaluation. One of the things that's happened here, and I talk about it a lot, and I've had the opportunity about, while the rest of the world, those countries that have the highest test performance, the China and Singapore and Taiwan, while they are trying at this moment to emulate and change their educational system to look more like our system, we are on this mission to emulate a country of test takers. And at the same time, we've now taken that same approach to our teachers. I am all for teacher accountability. I think we need to ensure that only the most qualified teachers enter into the profession of teaching. But just as we think of professions, of lawyers and doctors and other professions, there's a body of knowledge and there's a demonstration of that knowledge in a way that could be assessed that is not driven by what I would say is test scores primarily or other factors. I had the pleasure of attending an international test and measurement conference at Teachers College a month ago, where we looked at this value-added statistical models for evaluating teachers. And unfortunately, while there are some merits to the Harvard study to show over time the value of a quality teacher on a student, this kind of rush to move to these models that really aren't proven will have a dramatic influence on how teachers think about their teaching and what happens to students. So you have students who are perseverated about test after test. We have teachers who are worried about the results. And we're moving away from what we think is critically important. That is, how do we have conversations about what quality instruction looks like? How do we ensure that it's happening across the district? How do we invest in teachers to ensure they have the knowledge to do that? And how do we develop assessments that could assess what students in New Hampshire experienced in February around taking the knowledge of government, political system, and actually applying it in an authentic learning environment? So I do think we could do a better job. Unfortunately, again, I have no voice in that. I found it interesting, without entering into politics, that the governor just announced his educational reform panel across the state, and not one public educator was involved in that, on that panel. And it's disappointing because, again, I do think as the superintendent, we have some creative ideas about how we can improve our public school systems, but we just want to be a part of that conversation. And, we have been working over the last decade to understand how do we reform education, how do we have high standards of accountability for our teachers, but how do we invest in the people who work at our schools and demonstrate to our citizens that this is what learning should look like. So we're not challenged by accountability, but we want to be able to create a system that actually we think will result in the improvement of a teacher's practice and how students learn.
Do you think your hands are tied at this point?
I think what we're trying to do locally is we're saying what do we value and how can we look at our values as a district within the context of what the state is asking us to do. We're building that portfolio of what we'd say is a more authentic view of what's happening in the classroom. And then when we sit down and write up that formal observation or evaluation, we can speak to the growth or the problems that we see each day in our classrooms. And we feel that is a way to bridge or at least deal with the challenge of this teacher evaluation system that has been placed on us without any funding right now. Yes. Any other questions?
Dr. Shaps?
Yes.
2 questions. I'm happily amazed that you can save $800,000 by outsourcing the transportation. I hope the company taking it over will still be in business a year from now. But is there a lesson there? Are there other activities in the system that could be outsourced if there's such a tremendous difference between operating inside and letting people do it on the outside?
Well, I could say that we have and will continue to look at areas where we have the opportunity to outsource. We have collective bargaining agreements with our associations, clerical, obviously, and our administrators and teachers. And in some ways, we are certainly obliged to and will meet those responsibilities. But I want to give you another example. I strongly believe that we need to prioritize and think creatively about how technology can not only provide efficiency, but support our learning process. This year, we are contracting out with our Regional Information Center to have a Director of Technology service that is in such a way that we're not hiring that person as an employee. So we're going to have regional expertise in day-to-day management of our computer systems, but we're not having that individual be an employee. And to me, that would be an example that you point to of how can we find ways, in some ways, to outsource, but rely on contractual services. There are other areas where we have contractual services, our occupational therapists, and other people that we're allowed to bring in and not, in some ways, be obliged to healthcare, be obliged to pension costs and so on. So in those ways that we can find it on the personnel side, we'll continue to do it. On the operations side, where those are opportunities, we'll do that. At the same time, it's important to note that we have been working with our municipal partners, and I think this is critically important, and it speaks to your question. We meet in the town village schools on a regular basis, and our topic of conversation with the town of Mamaroneck is to say, how can we think of combining services? So how can we use your gas because of the savings that you get for your vehicles and use it to fill our vehicles and pay you a lower cost? How can we think about our fields? And so the maintenance of our fields and think about partnerships. A small example and a kind of cute example. If you don't know, there's a problem in the area of golf courses and fields with geese droppings. So our first point of topic of conversation is, can we all pitch in to buy this machine that will remove the droppings on our fields and golf courses and public parks? And we said, absolutely, because we don't all need the same machinery, but if we all pitch in to buy it, it will lower the cost for all. And that's an example of your point as well.
Second question.
Another one.
Another one. What is your unfunded pension liability, and how is that going to be handled in the future?
I would maybe turn to one of our board members. I mean, the reality is, the question was, what is our unfunded pension liability, and how we're going to handle it in the future? I mean, certainly the pension is driven by the state pension, the teacher's requirements. We pay in a certain percentage of a teacher's pension for a certain part of that. So it's not necessarily our liability, it's the liability. Yes, George? I'm sorry.
No, I want to finish
Yeah.
to give Norman a full answer, but go ahead.
It's not our liability. We have to commit to the cost for every employee to contribute towards the pension system. The liability is in the pension system and is driven and tied to their ability to fund that over time but the exposure of it for not only our employees, but the employees of the future. And that's why they recently moved to a new tier to lower that exposure over time and contribution at the end of an employee's retirement. But I mean, I think the biggest challenge is that on an annual basis, our contributions towards pensions based on the formula is outpacing our ability to maintain that within the tax cap, and that's the problem here. It's just growing beyond what I would say is a reasonable mean on an annual basis. And George?
Yeah, Norman, let me follow up on that. And I'm here also, Steve Otis is with us, who is the Chief Counsel to State Senator Susie Oppenheimer. Susie and I represent the two elected members of the state that are here every day and so forth. As Bob said, the pension plan is a statewide pension plan. Every municipal government, the Mamaroneck Library, other institutions are plugged into that. And as he said earlier, accurately, the local government entities that are part of the plan do not have the ability to negotiate other kinds of benefits or structures. The overall solvency of the plan is the responsibility of the New York State Comptroller. He's the sole trustee of the pension system. Now, in years when the investments of the pension system generated money to keep the fund solvent, the levels of contribution by the local governments and the school districts were much lower than they are today. We all know what happened in the mid-last decade with Wall Street. It affected personal money, it affected institutional money. So what happens each year is that the state controller ultimately makes a decision as to how much the contribution has to be from each of these different entities as their portion of pension costs, and the state itself has a portion as well, in order to keep the fund solvent. Compared to New Jersey and Illinois, New York has a solvent pension fund. What that means is that not only the school district trustees, the library trustees, the village officials and the town officials and the county officials all have to put a number in a budget that is a mandated number that they don't have control over. In the last couple of years, those numbers have spiked up for reasons that we understand, for what I've said and for some other reasons. And given the tax cap realities that have come into place, that increase exceeds the amount of additional discretionary money that the tax cap allows any of these governments to deal with. The override mechanism is different for the schools than it is for the other governments, where they can do it by vote of the board. In the school district, it has to come by vote of the residents and so forth. I just want to add one other piece to this, if I may. I do the same thing, so I'm not critical of Bob per se. We talk about the state as if it's monolithic, as if there is, the Wizard of Oz, one person, and that is the state. The state involves a governor who has certain public policies that he advocates. There's a Board of Regents and a state education department that reports to the Board of Regents and a variety of different individuals, Commissioner of Education. There is a legislature with legislative leaders and then individual legislators, and that's where the Susies and the Georges of the world come into play. So I would just caution you, when people talk about the state does this, the state does that, the end result policy that comes out of Albany is a function of where the power lay. But that does not mean that every one of those players agrees equally with every one of those policies. But it is frustrating because as a school board trustee must explain to somebody on the street what is happening to the tax certiorari actions in a community, that's a paragraph. The sound bite always beats the paragraph. And the sound bite is you're spending too much and I can't afford it. And that's something that village trustees face when they meet somebody on the street, town councilmen face, county legislator faces it, and school people as well face it. But I have to put that advisory in there because we talk about the state, again, as if there is, one Wizard of Oz-like entity, and it's all groupthink, and it isn't. We've had big battles over these very policies that have passed and come out, but there had been disagreement on roots of some of those policies.
Yeah, and I just want to add, and I certainly say both Susie and certainly with George, that we continue to talk about and try at the local level to say, here's what we think is good policy, it makes sense for us, and certainly I would say that George has been an advocate for that and understands the challenges we face and how important public education is to our community, as well as Susie. And I think we'll continue to work among those many voices as far as in Albany. The one thing I would say is that, I alluded to the panel that the governor has put forward. The one thing about Massachusetts since 1994 is that they have led the nation in student performance, not at the result of the highest costs in the nation. And I think the reason why superintendents want to be part of that conversation is we really believe, as they did in Massachusetts when they did ed reform in the 90s and looked at creative ideas, they included the people who were at the heart of the institution. And I think my reference to that is that we do believe that we have a perspective that is critically important that can help solve this lingering problem. We just want to have the opportunity to do that and have our voice. Yes, Bert?
Yeah, but the problem here is you're dealing with the symptom and not the disease. The disease is basically the benefits and pensions that have been negotiated and put into contract law is at the state level cannot be sustained. And so basically you're dealing with what's coming out of that process, and the bottom line is until there's some modification made to those benefits in the future years, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. I mean, my understanding is the town of Mamaroneck, one of the major contributor to their increase of budget this year is basically their commitment, their obligation of what they have to pay because of this assessment of the status of the pension systems. So until basically the people in Albany, and I don't have any faith that this is going to happen, either the legislative side or the governor's side, figures a way to deal with curbing these benefits going into the future. And I'm not talking about this Tier 6, which is a joke. I'm talking about basically the people who are working now and the people who are retired now. Somebody's going to have to take some haircuts in here to make this sustainable.
May I just add to that? The fairest thing that could be done, and it's difficult to do because there are people who don't want to do it, is to create a pension cost cap for all local governments that says basically if you're going to cap your taxes at no more than 2% a year, then there's a percentage, 2% or some other percent, that's agreed upon for which your pension costs cannot exceed. Then, what Bert says is accurate. The place to make the changes is in Albany, but right now the financial pressure is not on the state budget. The financial pressure is on all the local budgets, and that financial pressure manifests itself in property taxes, which is the tax that most people find objectionable because it's a lump sum tax, it's regressive, blah, 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 blah. So, building off of what Bert said, the decisions that have to be made are Albany decisions, and Albany ought to, I did the same thing I just criticized of, we ought to put the financial pressure on the state budget and not have it sit with the town and the village and all these other entities.
I think, but to your point, Bert, that is incredibly important. I think the Board of Education, the people who sit on the board, and the administration recognize our responsibility to the community in two ways. One, of finding ways to maintain and improve the quality of our schools, but also to commit to finding ways to work creatively with our employees to find solutions of problems that, to your point, force us to believe that we can't sustain this institution. I'm hopeful that with, what I would say is the shaking foundations at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level, that we'll find partners who understand the value in that and see the reason and rationale to think differently about the way we can move forward and find solutions. And that's what it's going to take. And I really believe we can do it. But at least I believe that the board wants to maintain and improve the quality of our schools, but certainly understands the impact on the citizen.
I think my sense is that you and the board are doing a wonderful job with the cards that you're dealt. The problem is those cards need to be changed. They need to be dealt some new cards.
Dr. Schatz, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we gotta move on now.
I'm going to move now.
I just wanted to say, would it be helpful if all of us, if we agree to address Governor Cuomo and
Yes, it
that
would be.
we place a superintendent
Yeah, it would be.
on
Yes,
this
this is what I was going to
committee?
suggest. This is where the League of Women Voters plays a role. I will say that in terms of
we're all here now, and if we're committed, I think this would be
it would be a
good
matter of coordinating efforts to write a letter. I will say in terms of the tax cap, the League of Women Voters has been vocal. In a way, in terms of shifting the obligations, the financial obligations for the pension fund is one piece of it. But I would say, from my point of view, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. That is, we have to get at the problem, but while we're fixing the problem, there's no reason why we can't have representation from the educational community on a board with the governor, and there's no reason why we can't, as long as we're committed to do it. It's enough to say we're going to do it, it's another thing to actually put the pen on the paper. But if people are willing to do this, I will help coordinate this, because I think this is what we're here for, to give our voice to Albany, whether that includes the governor or the comptroller or whoever that may be.
Well,
So if you're,
I appreciate that. I am sending a letter off to a colleague, Professor Thomas Kane from Harvard School of Education, who has been named a part of this, to remind him that he is representing an institution that's producing teachers and administrators administrators. And, you know, as a serving member of this panel, he has a responsibility to advocate for what I would say an inclusionary body, meaning a representative from the one system that is being looked at to reform.
Well, if there's a specific way that we can add to that effort, let us know so that we can actually follow through on it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to move along. We've got candidates who are running for the school board. I want to thank Michelle Lewis, who's put our programs together this year. She's done an excellent job. Dr. Schatz for coming here today. I want to announce that we're going to have New York State League of Women Voters President Betsy Swan at our annual meeting on June 4th, which is going to be at Denise Sidor's house. And I've asked Betsy to come because there is so much going on in the League of Women Voters, and what I just mentioned is an example of that, the advocacy that we do, not only public education, but we give a voice to what happens in the state and indeed in the country, and Betsy knows it far better than me, because there are many, many layers to what we can do, and I would really welcome having as many people come to the meeting. We'll get out the flyer for the event, but if you could just pencil it in, it's June 4th at I think 7:30 at Denise Sidor's home. I also want to mention on Thursday, May 10th at 6 o'clock at the Tarrytown Senior Center, there's going to be a forum on the Tappan Zee Bridge. Is that correct? Yes, the current Tappan Zee Bridge proposal. And if you want details, I've got the flyer up here. I am going to just briefly mention that on Monday night, Alice Bloom is going to be welcoming the 4 candidates for the school board for a conversation. On LMC-TV, it's going to be a taped event, and if you would just look on the LMC-TV screen, we'll obviously have this well before the election on May 15th, and we're going to have the 4 candidates, Robin Yachinsky, Melanie Gray, Roger Martin, and Victor Gotti. 3 of the candidates are here today. Victor is not here. I'm going to give a brief introduction, ask each of you to speak, and then the wonderful Alice Pernick, who has pulled this all together very quickly, is going to read a statement from Victor Gotti. First, Robin Yachinsky is the current board president, who's finishing her 2nd term. Will give a statement. We're going to ask our candidates to please limit your statements to 3 minutes. Melanie Gray, who is going to be running for her 1st term after having served as president on elementary, middle school, and high school PTAs, who's been very involved in the community for a very long time. Roger Martin, who's moved back to Mamaroneck. He was a graduate of Mamaroneck High School and the past president of 2 liberal arts colleges, Randolph-Macon in Virginia and Moravian in Bethlehem, PA, and a number of other positions which he will tell you about. And Victor Gotti, who is a parent of 2 elementary school students at Murray Avenue School, recently, I think in 2008, moved to Larchmont. He is a tax attorney at one of the big 4 accounting firms, and he has also been a volunteer. So if we could first please hear from Robin Yachinsky. Would you like to come up here? That may make sense. There's a microphone, if you wouldn't mind coming up here. And in the meantime, anyone who didn't have an opportunity to pay, if you can just catch up before you leave, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. Welcome. There's a microphone right here.
Should I put it on or just leave it there? That's good. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm Robin Yachinsky, and I'm the current board president. I know I only have 3 minutes, so I'm going to try to talk quickly. I was asked to speak on my reasons for running, my qualifications, and my views on the budget, bond, and major issues facing the district, so I'll try to do that. On a personal level, I have loved the work of being on the board this last 6 years. I think it's incredibly meaningful and important work. This last week we went on our annual board visits, and I visited probably about 18, 19 classes, and I really got to see then, as we always do, what's going on in our classrooms and the wonderful work and how we're reaching our children, and that's really what it's all about. And I'm devoted to public education and to public service, and I would love the opportunity to continue with that work. I have obviously been on the board for 6 years, and I've had quite a bit of experience. I'm currently on the finance committee and part of the collective bargaining team, and we're in mediation right now with our collective bargaining units. I've been on virtually every committee that we have, including communications, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished in opening up communications in the district. I'm on the building committee, which helped put forward, helped whittle down to the most important items, our bond, what's in our bond. I've also served on the audit committee, the fields committee, which helped put together that public-private partnership that resulted in Memorial Field. I've been on the law and policy committee and the safety committee. I've also been a liaison to most of our schools, and I've been on the special education task force, and I've had the opportunity over these last 6 years to really experience virtually every aspect of our school system. I'm also a lawyer, and behind the scenes, what many of you do not see is all the work that we do in terms of contracts. This is work that we conduct in executive sessions, which are confidential and not open to the public, but we deal there with how to manage lawsuits and other legal issues that come before the board. And I think that my experience as a lawyer has been very helpful in that regard. And I also have a background in conflict resolution. When I was at Central School, I was very instrumental in starting their core conflict resolution program, and I think that, and I was trained officially as a facilitator, and I think that helps me be able to reach common ground and not to capitulate, but to be able to look at all sides of an issue and try to find a way to make things work. So I'm proud of that particular experience as well. Why am I running? I'm running, I think the two words I would use would be consistency and balance. There are 3, as you know, open positions on the board. There are 7 members. 2 of our present members are in their first year. I believe in the value of new members. They bring a fresh eye and fresh questions, which is terrific. 5 members on a 7-member board who have either 2 years experience or are new, I think would create an imbalance. And there's also a value in having someone with the experience and consistency that I think that I can bring to the position. So it is unusual in our community to run for a 3rd term, but it was really that piece that propelled me to want to do this. In terms of the budget and the bond, I think I'm fortunate to be following Bob because he really does reflect what the board thinks. So the views that he's expressed, by and large, are the views that I hold. It was really our focus this year to find efficiencies, to be lean and mean in that regard, but to not impact our classrooms and to maintain what we really believe is the excellent quality of our educational programs. And in the years ahead, finding efficiencies will be more difficult, but we will continue to look at every program, and if the program is not working well or the program is not efficient, we will find a way to make changes. And we continue to try to push our legislators in Albany as best we can, and we're working hard being mindful of our taxpayers and the economic challenges we face. So I'm over. So thank you very much.
Melanie Gray? Is the mic working, or is it better if they put the mic on? If the mic's okay?
Hi, everyone. I know many of you. For those who don't know me, I've been in Larchmont. We came here, it's been almost 21 years, which is sort of shocking. When we moved here, there was still a stoplight by Longford's that was a 4-way stop. It wasn't Longford's back then. And that sort of communicated to us as this young couple coming out of the city that this was a child-centered community. And we ended up staying and raising our children, and we have not been disappointed in the child-centered part of it. And I think that's one of the reasons I got involved with the schools. My kids have had an excellent educational experience. I have a senior at the high school and a sophomore in college. I started getting involved with PTA. As you heard, I did a lot of it. As a PTA leader, working through the different schools and PT Council, I started attending board meetings. I learned that there was a lot to learn and that there was a lot people didn't know, and myself included. I'm an Army brat. I was used to kind of moving in and trying to figure out what was going on, and being a little bit on the out in terms of understanding the acronyms or the lingo. So I started trying to communicate through PTA what I was learning, attending a lot of board meetings, writing a few things for the Larchmont Gazette about what we were doing as PTAs. Judy Silverstein tapped me to step into some rather big shoes to start writing about the school board and the schools, because I was at those meetings anyway. I learned afterwards, by the way, that there was some issue as to my objectivity and whether I would be well suited. I'm still not clear as to whether they thought I would be too much pro-school or anti-school. I've had people accuse me of being each, so maybe I did a good job in terms of being editor. Or in terms of being objective and being well edited. I have been attending, though, in those PTA and Larchmont Gazette hats, board meetings and study sessions for about 10 years. I realized this year that I've been to 6 all-day, line-by-line review of the budget sessions. You can't do that and not learn something. So I think I bring some institutional knowledge. I think I could support Robin and the rest of the school board with a little bit of experience, recognizing obviously that I have a lot to learn. I am available. I work very part-time as an attorney. I do overflow. I understand that board work involves not just the Tuesday night meetings that we're familiar with perhaps as a community, although I wish more of us were familiar with it. It also involves a lot during the day. It involves Tuesday morning sessions. As an attorney, I think I bring my analytical skill. I spent a lot of years at a big law firm doing commercial litigation. I now do, as I said, overflow for a friend, law school classmate at a small labor and employment boutique. I had the experience of clerking for a federal judge for 2 years, and we did oral briefings. So there was no writing something pretty and slipping it on a desk. That was sort of defending what you thought and challenging sometimes the assumptions of a very bright judge who didn't necessarily see everything that he should in the first go-round. He got 99% of it. It was my job as the clerk to make sure he saw that extra 1%. So I think that I bring those analytical skills. I like to think I'm fair. I like to think that I really do see different sides of an issue. I work very much at that. I also have been involved with St. John's Church and involved in leadership there. We have something called a vestry, which I guess is akin to a board of directors. I've served as a vestry member, I think, for 3 years, and as junior warden, which I guess is akin to a vice president, for 4 years. I've been involved in the schools, as I said, but not just in PTA, as a parent member for special education, CSE, special education meetings. I've been involved as a grant writer. I got my start doing theater arts with elementary school kids. I've worked as a student member. I like this stuff. I like the people in the schools. I like working with them. I don't always agree with them, but I have a great deal of respect for the fact that our teachers, our administrators, and our parents, we're all coming out of it with the view that we have this love for children and how to make their experience good. Obviously,
We need to
wrap it up. Anyway, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I was not asked to talk specifically about the budget or anything else. I certainly have opinions on that, again, recognizing that I have a lot to learn. But I will say I agree that the superintendent, Bob and the board have done a great job in a very difficult year. And I hope I have the opportunity to help them next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And of course, we need to keep it brief because people need to leave. I don't mean to, be rude in any respect, but there'll be more of an opportunity when you speak to Alice Bloom on Monday to be able to voice more of your thoughts. Roger Martin, would you please join us? Welcome.
Thank you.
How much have they added on to Mamaroneck High School since you graduated?
Oh, it's a different place than when I went. My name is Roger Martin. Good morning. I am a product of the school system. I moved here from New York City with my parents when I was 1. Went to Mamaroneck Avenue School, went to the high school graduating, in 1961, and it really has changed enormously. I went off to college and grad school, and when I graduated from Oxford University, I'm a British historian. I've spent my whole career in higher education, teaching at Middlebury College, being a dean at Harvard, associate dean at the Divinity School, and then, as mentioned, being the president of 2 liberal arts colleges. And I have to say that everything Bob talked about here, I've gone through as a college president. And I think that one of the things I can bring to the table is my experience working with budgets, working with curriculum, working with teacher evaluation, working with all of these things to do this with the school board should I be elected. Today I'm doing 2 big things. In retirement, I retired in 2006 and moved back to Mamaroneck with my wife. I volunteer with the counseling office. Matter of fact, in an hour, I'm going to go over to the school. I work with the counseling office around college admissions. I do mock interviews. Been doing this for 4 years with rising high school juniors and seniors, and I love it. You know this, but this is a very special group of students at Mamaroneck High School. I also run a consulting firm called Academic Collaborations. I work with colleges and universities nationally that are facing problems with boards of trustees, with their president, around budget, and I mentor new college presidents. And I'm doing this, and I'm really excited about it if I get elected, because this community gave me so much that I want to give back to it. And I think that because of my experience, I can bring something to this community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alice Pernick is going to come up and join us, but imagine it's Victor Gotti.
Okay, clearly I am not Victor Gotti, but I'll do my best in the interest of fairness to hear from all the candidates, to read you his statement that he provided for us. I have a soft voice, so I'm just going to move this a little closer. I appreciate the opportunity to provide a brief statement to the League of Women Voters concerning my background and the reason why I have decided to take this opportunity to run for the Board of Education. My wife, Alexandra, 2 daughters, Georgia and Samantha, and I moved to Larchmont from New York City in 2008. The town and the surrounding area have been all that we could have expected and more. We've been blessed to have met a lot of great people and to have forged great friendships. Georgia and Samantha began kindergarten at Murray Avenue last fall, and we've had nothing but a great experience with both of their teachers and their education so far. I started to consider involvement with the school district in March of 2010 during the contentious budget meeting at Mamaroneck High School. The principal issue motivating me then and now is that the trajectory of the budget, because of the ever-expanding size of the non-discretionary costs, is inexorably leading us down a path where we're forced to make difficult decisions about which programs need to be cut from the discretionary portion of the budget. 2 years ago, there was the cancellation of certain sports programs and the threat of a substantial change to the kindergarten schedules. This year, we face the transportation issue for children who attend private or parochial schools. Over time, we will be forced to make potentially more serious decisions about whether to cut certain other programs that most of us would consider to be a fundamental part of the educational experience. Programs like foreign languages, drama, and other sports might face reductions or cancellation. For example, the number of field trips has been cut back substantially at Murray Avenue over the last few years. Whether or not field trips are essential to the education of our children may be debatable, but I don't think that we should have to constantly face the dilemma of which programs need to be cut without the ability to extract savings from the non-discretionary portion of the budget. I recognize that the budget, and in particular the non-discretionary portion of it, is not something that I alone can change. Even then, any change will likely take a long time due to the various laws and political constituencies involved. However, these changes cannot take place without a serious determination and relentless effort to find any and every opportunity to make changes. While there are many other issues that come before the Board of Education, the budget constraints affect nearly all of them. Making changes in the non-discretionary portion of the budget might provide us with greater flexibility so that we have an opportunity to make decisions about the curriculum, the capital expenditure plan, and other educational decisions with a view to what best serves the educational needs of our children, rather than merely what might be possible given the budget constraints. I think that I would be a valuable member of the board because of the skills I can bring to the position and the effort and intensity that I bring to bear for my clients in my profession as a tax attorney. I'm a partner in the KPMG LLP International Corporate Services practice. KPMG, as you may know, is one of the big 4 accounting firms. In my position, I work with clients to address the various international tax issues associated with their business and, in many cases, the various transactions they enter into. The nature of my profession often requires me to negotiate the tax laws of multiple countries in order to obtain the desired results. In addition, I often have to work with various diverse groups within the client who may often have contradictory needs and objectives. In short, my private practice in many ways involves the same issues faced by members of the board. We would have to address the needs of the students, the teachers, the public, the government, and any other relevant stakeholders. While I do not have a lot of experience in the education field, I have found my skills as a tax attorney to translate into many other fields. I have no doubt that I would be a very valuable member of the board. I have also spent the last 6 months or so working as a volunteer of the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee. In this capacity, I've had the pleasure and opportunity to work on forecasting the budget for the next 5 years. In this position, I've gained some additional insight into the budget. The 5-year projection in the tax cap era clearly demonstrates that we will have to make serious decisions about the budget and property tax increases. I think the opportunity is now to seek greater control over the non-discretionary portion of the budget. There is no scenario in which these expenses stay constant or slow down. We clearly need to make sure that any future tax increase, whether under the cap or over the cap, represents a sound decision that there is no other option. We all pay substantial property taxes. We should have the right to ensure that any increases come as a last resort. We should not face a future where our property taxes increase and the educational resources decrease. Thank you. And I just want to add that Mr. Gaddy will be present on Monday at the taping of the conversation. So if you want to see what he looks like, you should check on the LMC website for the times when it's going to be rebroadcast. So thank you.
Before you leave, this is a segue into something that's very relevant to our children. I think, as you all know, I chair the Hydraulic Fracturing Committee for the League of Women Voters, and I've been working with Angela Fox, who's Josh Fox's mother, and a coalition of other women, including Yoko Ono, Deborah Winger, Theo Colborn, who is involved in toxicology, looking at the environmental impacts on our children's health. I can't help but recognize that in our school budgets, we are compelled to have to increase our budgets for special education. And while I'm not a scientist, I am the daughter of a doctor, but I have to observe that the environmental pollution is, in my opinion, from doing a lot of reading, having impacts not only on our children's physiological health, but on, frankly, IQ as we go along and their performance in the future. We are working very hard to get a letter to Michelle Obama that's going to be printed in the New York Times the day before Mother's Day. That's next week. And if anybody is interested in signing that letter, I can get it to you on an email. If anybody wants to contribute actually toward publishing the letter, we're still trying to raise some funds for that. But again, this is something that mothers around, and you don't have to be actually a biological mother, you can be an aunt, you can be an adoptive parent. We are talking about the future of our children, and we are very, very concerned. I am in touch now with mothers across the country because of the work that I've been doing who have children in schools where the drilling is going on. And indeed, we're putting up compressor stations literally right over the border. When I say compressor, we are compressing natural gas, and it is off-gassing gas that our children are breathing right where they're going to school. We've got drilling operations going on all over the country, and even though it isn't in our backyard, it is certainly impacting the children that are going to be the future leaders of our country. So to the extent you are interested in participating in all of this, this is the kind of thing that finds its way into our school budget, if not directly, then indirectly. So if you do wish to be a part of this, please come up later, and I'll be happy to give you the link and send you the letter.
Yeah. Could you please include grandmothers?
Absolutely. Because grandmothers are certainly super mothers, right? Right. All right. Thank you all for coming, and best wishes. Thanks.